Hi, and welcome to the Personal Side of Business, where every business has a story. My name's Jet Bundenwong. Today, my guest is Barney Connaughton. He's a divorce mediator based in San Diego. He's the founder of A Healthy Divorce and author of Untangling Together, a healthy divorce guide and workbook. With a background of over 30 years in law and a heart for healing, Barney helps couples navigate one of life's most difficult transitions with clarity, compassion, and cooperation. Welcome, Barney.
Thanks a lot, Jet. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So tell us, how did you get here?
How did I get here? So, thinking back, my first career choice I made when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I wanted to be a police dog. I quickly moved past that, and when I was applying for college, I wanted to write. I wanted to be an English major. I wanted to write. When I went to college, I went on the school newspaper, and I hated it. I hated journalism. I didn't enjoy it. And becoming a writer, and my other desire was to have a family. Becoming a writer and having a family were kind of didn't quite line up typically. But as a beginning career, you had to do other things to supplement. So I quickly moved to considering going to law school, and I wanted to save the world. I went to law school thinking I might be an environmental attorney or something like that and help clean up, the damage that was happening to the earth. And I really fell into becoming a family law attorney. And really what that looked like is when I got out of law school, the job market was terrible. I ended up hanging up a shingle with a couple of my buddies, and we did whatever came in the door, and that was a mix of family law cases, some immigration, some bankruptcy, some estate planning stuff, and the opportunity that most came in the door was divorce stuff. And there was a program at the time that a new attorney would be provided a mentor, and the program through the Bar Association would give cases to new attorneys. They would charge a discounted rate, and we would have a mentor whenever we, got stuck with a difficult challenge. We could call our mentor, and they'd talk us off the ledge. And through that, I started learning the craft. I started understanding divorce. I started developing value in being able to handle divorce for people. And so I really fell into, I think, becoming a family law attorney, which is really interesting because as I now have moved through my career, I go, it was really my calling. And I really genuinely feel like I found my place accidentally.
It kind of found you too. Like it kind of went and grabbed you, that pulled you in while you were just searching. Because I'm assuming you were single at the time before you got into this.
I was single, but I was by the time I was going to law school, I had a girlfriend who ended up becoming my wife, and so I, but again, an interesting part of my path through becoming a family law attorney is, so I started out, hanging out my own shingle, and then we had our first child. And when we had our first child, I needed to make a steady income. And so I ended up joining a husband and wife firm. The wife did family law. And so I kind of, under her tutelage, did family law with their firm for about 8 or 9 years before I finally was in a position to branch back out on my own and do my own thing. The other really significant event that happened was in 2003, I took a divorce mediation training, where the trainers, one of them was a therapist and one of them was a family law attorney, and they would do this mediation where one of them was there to kind of tackle the emotional issues in the divorce. The other one was there to tackle the legal financial issues in the divorce. And through this team, they would help couples stay out of the courts and work through the issues, in a quiet setting, and kind of deal with the emotions and help them divorce in a good way. And when I saw that, I was litigating at the time. I was, really all my cases were litigations where I would represent one spouse. And sure, we would try to settle cases without needing to use the courts too much, but usually the courts would have some involvement, either initiating the beginning orders of the case, and then maybe we would settle before we got to trial. But this new framework, this mediation framework that I found in 2003, I go, this is the way that families should divorce. It's just a holistic approach, keeping the couple in charge of making the decisions that need to be made instead of having the courts step in and make those decisions for them. So at that time, I was working for this other firm. I didn't get a chance to mediate until I moved out on my own. And when I moved out on my own, that was 2006, my vision was to move from being a litigator to having a practice that was mediation. The challenge with doing that is with each litigated case, you are on the case for a couple of years, and the amount of money that you earn per case is a lot more than what you earn when you're mediating, because in mediation, you get in, you educate, you work through the issues, and then you settle and you move out and you're moving to the next case. So you need to have a lot more cases coming in to mediate because it's a much more efficient process. So moving out on my own and moving quickly to a place where I'm mediating was just really not realistic. And so over time, I've kind of moved my practice toward getting to a place. In 2020, I finally took my last litigating case. And for the last 5 years, I've been able to just do mediation, which for me it's my calling. I mean, I went through that path of litigating, and I was fine at litigating, but I just felt like this is not the right process for divorce. There are couples that need it. Yeah. There's couples that can't agree and need some third person to step in and make the decisions for them. But I think most couples are capable with the right tools that mediation provides to do it in this better way where we're not involving the court.
When couples come in, and can you tell right away if that's going to be a great fit for mediation? Or can you work up to it over time if one party or both parties are not really on the same page?
Yeah. So it used to be, before I became entirely mediation, part of my issue was I'm trying to get clients. So my message to the world was I'm a litigator and I'm a mediator. If I get, and what would happen is a single person would come in looking to hire an attorney, and I would say before I crossed a line that I couldn't come back from in being a mediator, is I would say, is there any possibility of mediating? And so in those situations, I had to quickly assess, is this single person a possibility? Is there a way to get their spouse on board and to mediate this thing? Once I moved my practice to just mediation, most of the people coming to see me, they would come together. And so I would, and that's really all you need initially to mediate is a willingness to give it a go.
That's a great sign that they're going to work.
Exactly. And they're coming to me a healthy divorce, recognizing that, hey, we want to try to do this in a good way. We're just trying to find fairness. We're just trying to get our stuff sorted out and understand what we need to sort out. And so that's definitely a good sign. And so in the beginning, it was a lot harder to assess because I only have one spouse, and it's kind of clunky getting the other spouse on when they're out searching for their own attorney. And once an attorney becomes involved, it typically would be a lot harder to pull it back into mediating.
Yeah, so. And one of the things that you had brought up that I felt like after reading your book was really poignant is that you want to take this from a holistic approach, right? So it's not just about two people going in there and trying to essentially work things out, finances, children, whatever it is that's involved in the divorce, but it's to also bring yourself while you're involved in this to a different place, that you're, in a sense, compassionate with someone that you're breaking apart from and possibly trying to get finances, kids from, a house from. So there were three things that I felt like that really spoke to me. Was one, it was the education. I think you try to hit it home a bunch of times in the book that you should try to educate yourself in so many different facets of what goes into a divorce. Two, it's the higher self, which I think is really hard for people to do, right? When they're going through this emotional and a lot of turmoil, I think, that goes into divorce, and being a child of a divorce family, I feel like that is super hard to do because you're trying to pull everything to try to make the other person angrier, feel the pain, even sometimes put it on the kids, right? Unconsciously. Mm-hmm. And then also the main thing I feel like that's the hardest to do is to take that emotion out of it and really look at it from almost like a financial, educational standpoint. That is this going to be good for me and for the other person and for the kids, whoever else is involved. And I think you touch upon it. There's other people involved too, right? Friends, family that get affected by this. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach those holistic ways while you're mediating with couples?
Yeah. So let me begin by saying, I think the business process of divorce is pretty simple, right? There's a few things that we do. We need to get educated. So with mediation, I need both spouses to understand what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, so that they're educated and they can make decisions for themselves. When each side hires an attorney, they can kind of cede that responsibility to their attorney. Their attorney is the one who knows the stuff and is going to be there at their side to help them make the decisions. So when I mediate, I can't represent both sides. So instead, I set to work educating both sides so that they don't need me to be there as their attorney. They're comfortable, they have the information, they know their rights, so that they're in a comfortable spot to make the decisions. So this first part of getting educated, I'm here to educate them. They need to get educated. They need to ask the questions when I'm giving the information so that they're comfortable, in a comfortable place when it comes time to make the decisions. They're comfortable. That's the first thing. The second thing is the court has a disclosure requirement, which means you got to open the books. You got to list all your assets and your debts and your income and your expenses, and you've got to exchange that information. You got to provide documents to verify so that there's trust in the numbers that we're working with. We know what the assets are. We know what they're worth, so we know how to evenly divide them. We know what the incomes are, so we know how to fairly set support. So that's the second task, is we've got to get there. If there's trust and cooperation, mediation's awesome because we can quickly identify what we need. We can get that information. Typically, when each side hires an attorney, it becomes a little more pulling teeth getting that information from each side. Sometimes there's a very expensive discovery that has to be done to turn every stone so that you can get that information. So that's the second step. So we need to get educated. We need to exchange information. And then the third part is we need to know what our options are to settle. And in mediation, we move quickly through those first two, and then here we are. What do we want? What does each spouse want? A conversation I get to have in mediations is, how do we make sure you're both okay? That's a conversation typically we don't see in litigation, but when I mediate, that's on the table. How do we make sure that you're both okay so you can move on with life? And that's relationship with kids. If you have kids, it's being able to manage your finances. You've got enough money to pay the bills. You got enough money to live how you are used to living. And then we need to divide up your stuff, and so we can move to that. What's a practical, reasonable way? What are our options? And mediation allows us to be creative with that. So I get to hear what both sides looking for. I can let the couple know what a judge likely would do, kind of the ballpark of what the judge would do. But then also maybe there's things that a judge wouldn't do that make perfect sense for the family, like a good example is we have really low interest rates. 5 years ago, we had low interest rates on our mortgages. Now interest rates are up. If you divorce and you've got to buy the other person out of the house and refinance the house, your interest rate might go from under 3% to 6.5% or 7%. We can tackle that. We can keep the mortgage in place, or there's things we can do that protect both sides and allow the family to benefit from a continuing lower mortgage rate that just results in more money in the overall in the family, with one spouse or the other spouse. So mediation allows for that creativity. Litigation, we have discussion at settlement and we can explore those things, but it just becomes a little more challenging because we're not sitting right down to the table together to sort those things out. So again, coming back to it's really a simple task. We've got to get educated. We've got to exchange this information. We've got to explore our options. And once we've done that, then we can settle and move on. The tricky part is there's also this emotion thing, this dang emotion thing that kind of gets in the way that we have to navigate. And sometimes one spouse is full speed ahead, and one spouse is going, "What the heck just happened?" And they're not in that place where they're ready to make these decisions that they need to make. So tackling the emotions, giving space for the emotions, is part of our work. We have to recognize that that's an element to what we're dealing with, and sometimes giving that space is going to allow us to get to a place where we're able to mediate, where we're able to work together. Sometimes not at the beginning, we're not there. Yeah. And so that becomes the bigger challenge. That becomes a complicating issue feasibly, is when there's lack of trust, or there's just anger and resentment that gets in the way of doing it maybe an easier way.
Have you ever spoken or assisted a couple at the beginning, and you felt like the anger and the emotion was too high, and you maybe advise them to back off a little bit, maybe stop talking to each other for like a week or two, come back, and let's kind of let that anger and frustration just subside a little bit? Does that ever happen?
Definitely. One tool that I use is, sometimes I know that either in the beginning when we have all our energy and not 2 hours into the session, we've got to tackle a bigger issue. So when I get organized, definitely if after a first session we've identified there's a big issue, I don't try to tackle that at the end of that first session. I go, okay, let's pause. Let's wait. Let's give you a little bit of time to digest the information I've given you, maybe the legal information, and then let's come back and tackle it fresh. Definitely, there are times where things just heat up a little bit too much, and it's no longer productive because we're kind of stuck in the anger part of it. And so, giving it space, saying, okay, let's break for now. Let's schedule our next session and come back and hit it fresh. Definitely. That, and I've also seen it where, as I mentioned, where one side is, they're ready to move on. They're done. The relationship's over, and one where they're not there, and they're still grappling with the emotion of it. And the option becomes, if we're moving too slow, one person's going to say, "Forget this mediation thing. I'm going to go hire an attorney and move forward that way." But on the other side of it, if you move too fast, then you're not going to. That's going to be your only option. Your spouse isn't going to be ready to work with you and try to do something reasonable because they're not quite ready. So I have definitely had conversations with couples that acknowledge both. Acknowledge that, hey, we don't want to go too slow. That this is no longer acceptable to the one, but we don't want to go too fast because we want you both in a place where you are in a good place to make decisions. So.
Because that's probably going to come out the open, right? I think one of the reasons why couples end up separating, divorcing, is because of communication. So now you're having to really use that value in communication in trying to mediate this. But that was one of the causes that could have been a cause for them.
Absolutely. Oftentimes communication is broken down, and that's one of the nice things with mediation is there's a neutral other person in there to help that conversation. So the other thing is that person that wants to go fast, that things are moving too slow, they're going to find that things do not move fast in litigation. I mean, it takes a long time before you're in front of a judge for the initial things, and then a lot longer to get to a trial at the end. So it's not going to suddenly move fast because you hire an attorney and start filing paperwork with the court. But it at least gives them a sense that there's movement forward. Whereas if, one person's just dragging on and they're not ready to get started, it can make you feel like you're stuck. So,
and during this mediation, can you advise, or do you try to stay out of the children in there? Because I'm assuming there's gonna be couples that use children as leverage to go back and forth, right? To like, this is what I want, and it's because I'm going to take care of the kids more, whatever it is. Do you start to look out for their well-being, those children's well-being, as this mediation goes? Yeah.
So what we have to deal with how they're going to share their kids. I mean, that's one of the issues that we deal with through the mediation. And in doing that, I mean, the important things that the courts recognize are that each parent get to have an opportunity to maintain a continuing relationship with the kids. If there's any safety issue, we want to address safety issues, make sure kids are safe and their needs are being met in both households. And so in my conversation, and I have not been through a divorce myself, but I have 3 kids. They're adults now, but I am absolutely sympathetic on the thought of not being able to spend full time with your kids. Yeah. I mean, what a terrible thing to have to face when you're going through a divorce. And so I am here to help them hopefully recognize the importance of each of their relationships with the kids, so that because that's oftentimes something that stands in the way in litigated cases, is each side is trying to get as much time as they can have. And it's not a more symbiotic, hey, our kids need a relationship with both of us, and we want to make sure we work together as a team to make sure their needs are being met. So I get the opportunity to give my input as a parent, to kind of help them as they're navigating. I think most couples that come to mediation, that's one of their big motivations, is they don't want to make their kids feel like they're stuck in the middle of it. And so I don't think it's too often that I need to kind of assert, you think about this.
I guess that's a good point. That if someone were to come to mediation at this point, I guess they're seeing something a little bit differently than just going to court and going to litigation and fighting it out. At least there's this open window for them to have some compassion for the other person. I was curious too, reading your book, have you dealt with couples that, as you've gone through mediation, end up staying together because they were like, oh, this was something actually we can work on and fix, instead of just trying to tear our family apart because of it?
Mm-hmm. I always have my ears open to that possibility. Most couples that come to me, at least one of the spouses has made a decision that they're done. But I've had a few for sure over the years where maybe something said in mediation that makes me go, what was that? And then I'll ask some questions and dive in a little bit deeper. One that I remember in particular, each side had an attorney for a year. They were a year into their divorce, and their direction from their attorneys is not to communicate with each other. And
were they living in the same household?
They weren't living in the same home. They were living in separate places. But all communication had been cut off, and our conversation made it sound like there was a possibility of reconciling or something, but they hadn't had any communication. So in that case, I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you, some time for you, just the two of you, to talk, and let's figure out if moving forward is kind of where you're at. And so I left them, and then I they came back 20 minutes later or so and said, "Hey, we want to try to reconcile."
Wow.
And so we stopped what we were doing. They tried to reconcile. I mean, they ended up coming back a few months later to move forward because they decided it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But definitely, I just want to help the people do it in a good way if they need to do it in a good way. But if there's another option, which is, I don't know, going to couples counseling or giving it some space, then I'm all for that, and I'll listen for it. But usually, it's pretty rare that they're going to step back. But
is there that opportunity for when they go to mediation that you can suggest them to go to couples therapy and then into other, I don't know, maybe like someone just needs help work on themselves a little bit, like one of the two starts working themselves, and maybe it's a therapist for them, and then starts to break into other areas where like, oh, we're starting to see there's these little gaps that could help you become a better person overall, that maybe that will help this marriage. Have you ever seen that where like, this is not really about the marriage, this is something that's happening to this one person in between them and they just need to get help or something?
Yeah. So my perch where I am when they come into me, I don't get too much of an opportunity, and most couples aren't looking for me to scrutinize, their decision to be divorcing.
Yeah.
With that said, I have a resource list of therapists, and definitely if there's any opening or if there's any anything that I see that makes me think that maybe you should step back. But otherwise, I went to law school. I'm not a therapist. I've worked with lots of couples, and I've been doing this stuff a long time. But at the end of the day, I'm not the best person to be telling them whether their relationship is fixable or not fixable. And usually they've decided that it's not, and so they're coming to me to help.
How do you think going to litigation first has helped you with the mediation?
Yeah, it's what's really nice is I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like at the courts, and so I can share. This is what it looks like, and it's night and day. It's night and day. The two. It's like it's even with the best of intentions, and when I started practicing family law, my heart was always I want to help families do this in a good way. I mean, whether or not I won or lost my argument, if the judge made a decision that felt like that probably was the best decision for the family, then ultimately I was fine with it. I mean, of course, I was advocating for my client, but even with the best of intentions, the process is still a long process. I mean, the nice thing with mediation is we sit down, we identify we need to get educated, we need to exchange information, and we need to explore options. There's nothing more efficient than that, really. That the process of going through those same steps to the court, get the coming up with final resolution is ultimately being in front of the judge, usually, unless you can settle, and that takes a long time, and that costs a lot of money. I mean, you have to do up papers, you have to prepare for the trial and the hearings, and you have to gather all the information formally, sending out discovery and doing all these things that are all extremely expensive and take a long time, so that a couple that could really use some quick answers, they're not getting quick answers, they're not getting that help right away to move through these things, and so it's a time-consuming thing. Again, even with the best of intentions, when you have two good attorneys that are trying to do the best for this family, it just takes a lot longer. Whereas if we can sit right down and work through things, it costs a lot less. It's a much more immediate addressing of issues that have arisen for short-term and for long-term resolution, and it's cooperation. It's cooperation. so that the two spouses have made these decisions. So let's say if they have kids together, they're going to be able to make other decisions together moving on. Whereas when you're litigating, you're going to have to keep on going back to the court to resolve conflict. In mediation, there's conflict. We still have to work through stuff and get to a place of agreement, but the couple has done that themselves so that they're better situated to resolve things as they move forward.
Do you think there is a lot of work that you need to do in order to build trust between a couple that just comes in, or do you think they're there for business and it's you're?
Yeah, I guess it depends where the referral came from. Partly, I mean, if they've heard good things about me from other people, then it becomes an easier task. My greatest task is making them both comfortable that I'm truly neutral. Yeah. I'm there for both of them, which can be a challenge sometimes because some of the information that I'm going to be giving them is favorable to one over the other because that's what the law says. You're going to have a higher earner and you're going to have a lower earner. The higher earner might not hear what I'm saying about this is how support works. The lower earner may not be working full time, and maybe they're not going to like that. I'm going to say, well, probably the court's going to make you work full time, and so there's information that I give that it's coming from a neutral place. I'm educating them from a neutral place, but it's more favorable to one than the other. So it's critical that they trust that I'm there as a neutral. And I think I've built up enough, reviews and whatnot that people can, if they research me, they can see that the clients that I've helped have recognized that I am truly a neutral person. I pride myself in my neutrality, and I recognize the importance of it. And so I do everything I possibly can to try to maintain and make them both feel comfortable that I'm there for both of them. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, for someone that's been doing it for over 3 decades, do you think the stigma and the education that is available right now has changed overall from when you started to 2025?
I think there's more alternate dispute resolution. I think there's more mediation. There's more mediators out there, to be sure. I still am amazed that people don't know. I run into a lot of people who don't know about the mediation option, and that's part of why I wrote the book. Is we have to do everything we can to let couples know that you don't have to just go lawyer up. I mean, there's other ways of doing this that are quite effective. Maybe they need to lawyer up because whatever their circumstance may be, but exploring the other possibilities. So I think it's my task, and it's the task of those of us who do this work to keep on getting the word out, keeping on letting everybody know that there is this other option. There's much better avenues to take to sort things out if you're in a position that you can work together and kind of have the same common goal of resolving things fairly and being allowed to move forward.
Yeah. And now I just wanted to kind of go in a little bit of a different direction. For you, as someone who's working with people, being a mediator, and I feel like especially from reading your book and is doing some research, that it feels a little bit different from my perspective, that if you were to go into litigation, it feels more cut and dry in a sense, right? You're trying to just get these things done and move forward and help your client, where I feel like in mediation, you're looking at trying to understand more both sides, give your opinion, deal with a lot of more emotional things in my eyes. What have you done for yourself over the years to really maybe either educate yourself or put yourself in a better position that you can be more compassionate or whatever it is, right? Because I think there's always human biases, right? That you're going to go into a situation and go, oh, I I relate to this person more than the other person, but I have to be neutral, do this. What has been some of the work that you've done internally?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I'll take a step back, which is with litigations. The interesting thing is most litigations don't go to trial. So in San Diego County, we have, before a case goes to trial, there's a mandatory settlement conference. And a mandatory settlement conference is a volunteer attorney who basically acts as a mediator who tries to help the couple and their attorneys settle the case. Most of those cases settle. And so it's like they're moving to mediation 2 years, $100,000 into their divorce. And ultimately it settles with the assistance of a neutral kind of weighing in and giving input and helping them kind of do the exploration that I would say early in a mediation is that's what we do. So it's very similar, and it's interesting that lots of litigations ultimately are resolved through mediation. And so it just takes a lot longer to get there. Yeah. And it ends up being this exploration of flexibility that because you say it's cut and dry, but cut and dry can be all or nothing. And that decision can be, there's gray areas in the law, and there's all these other things that make it so there's no certainty that it's going to turn out this way. It could turn out that way. And then with the stakes so high, negotiating settlement makes sense. It takes the risk, can take the risk out of all or nothing in front of a judge. So a lot of the same stuff is used in litigation, so it's not so I would say cut and dry, and it's ultimately a lot of it is settled through negotiation. The second part of what you were saying is how do I get to that place? I guess that it comes back to my thought that I ended up where I belonged, right? Which is the cases walked through my door that were divorce, and I fell into divorce, and I didn't even take a divorce class in law school. I mean, I was not looking at divorce, and there I am becoming a divorce attorney. And then, the reason that I became an attorney is I like fixing things. I don't like conflict. I like to fix conflict and, let people move on. And so it's me, when I mediate, that's what I'm about. I just want to help people fix their, disagreement, use the tools that we have to help them get there. I also like fairness. So I don't want people to be treated unfairly, and I don't want to get rid of the conflict by being unfair to somebody. I want to explore and find a good resolution that lets people move forward. And so my heart is in I don't know how I got there, but my heart is in the work, and I truly care about the families. I truly care about the kids. I want to make sure that kids experience as little turbulence as possible when their parents need to go through a divorce, and that they don't lose out on the relationships that they have with their parents when that happen, when their parents need a divorce.
Yeah, that's great. And through all these decades of you working with different couples and seeing so many different cases, what has become your current consensus of relationships and love?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm lucky. I found I'm still in a relationship that I found when I was in my 20s, and definitely something I recognize is it takes a lot of work. And sometimes we don't. Our first selection isn't a right selection, and that's okay. That all relationships don't have to work, and if they don't work, then what do we do about that? How do we move forward? Being embroiled in conflict for a few years to move past it is not a good solution. I mean, it's life is short. If we make a wrong decision, how do we move past it, learn from it, and move forward? So this work, I'm all about family, And I think that in divorce, there's still family, especially if there's kids, there's family. I mean, it's the family changes. We move on with new relationships and everything else. But the more we do to cut out the conflict, allows for grandparents to have better relationships, friends, so that that a divorce doesn't result in us losing our friendships that we may have gathered from the other side, from our spouse. So the answer is to this question of what have I learned about love and relationships is the better we address conflict when we have it, the better life is after it, Yeah. And so doing this work it's important work, working through a divorce in a way that as much as possible preserves friendship, relationship, the finances, everything else.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that's a tough part, I think, for a lot of people to see through that, right? I think, thinking back on who I was and working myself throughout the years, anger and emotions was my downfall, right? It snapped things. I would be able to get into a headspace that wasn't healthy for me to think correctly. So your book really touched upon a lot of things that I felt like over the years working on allowed me to see things and also see the other side of things when what people are going through. I think that's a big thing. One of the things I want to wrap up is if someone is trying to get into mediation or divorce law, what is your advice for them right now?
So you're talking about like a professional who's thinking of going into it. Wow. I think, you have to learn it, right? And so, working with somebody, having a mentor, I was so lucky. I had a great mentor who, as I said, talked me off the cliff and was there for me when I needed it, when things, got hairy. But, so having somebody to learn from, and then understanding that there's, it's something like a divorce is it's one of those things where often there's an importance in relationship after, especially if there's kids, there's that importance in relationship after. So as you move into doing it, look at what's the best way to do it and explore mediating. And as I said, it took me a while to get there because it's a different dynamic. You need to have more clients and you can litigate. You can be an attorney for one side with your view of solving this problem for this family and letting this family move forward. So there are a lot of attorneys not mediating that are doing hard, important work also of trying to help families move through. And they're not just trying to run up their bills and, keep couples stuck in it. They're genuinely trying to gather the information so that they can get to a place of making the decisions that need to be made. So I would say going into it, have an eye toward a holistic approach as much as possible, that you're dealing with relationships and families and important things that just going and trying to get the most for your client. I guess that's part of our duty as an attorney, but it's also taking a step back and going, what's best for this family? Because what's best for the family, best for the kids may ultimately be what's best for our client. Getting them out of the conflict and moving past reasonably.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that advice. And where can people find you?
You can go to ahealthydivorce.com. That's my website. And I have links to schedule free consultations. You can also, if you're going through divorce, my book, Untangling Together, I think it's just a good resource and it's this, I guess what I would say, the holistic approach. And and it's for everybody. I mean, so if you've already hired an attorney, the book talks about being educated, even though you have an attorney, is so valuable because then you're in a better spot to give input and help guide at the end of the day, you're the one who's getting divorced. So being able to play an active role in making those decisions, getting educated is a great help. And then it talks about things like you mentioned of stepping into your higher self, and making these decisions from a place where we can be proud of the choices we've made, that there's fairness, and it's not just fairness to ourselves, it's fairness overall in resolution. So you can check out the book. You can otherwise find me at ahealthydivorce.com.
Great. Thank you, Barney. And, this is just a personal recommendation. Reading the book as someone who is not going through divorce, it's just educational and it's great. And I think it allows you to see yourself and the relationship you're in from a different light. So thank you, Barney, for that. And thank you for being in the podcast. This is The Personal Side of Business.
Thanks, Jen.